It's the 3rd of June, 2021, Abhayagiri Monastery. Time keeps passing. And the Anapanasati requested the Dhamma talk, so it's an acknowledgement that we speak on Dhamma or on the teachings when requested. So that's actually shows that people might be willing to listen or lend ear or hear what might be said or take it on for consideration. So that requesting of the Dhamma talk, it's a acknowledgement that it's like anything. If we just go and talk to people or talk at people about what we want them to believe, then it's not going to work. But if somebody comes and asks us, what are your views on this? What are your thoughts on this? And they ask us, then we can talk about it, and then they'll listen to us. But if we just want to go out and talk about, hit people over the heads with our views and opinions, it's not going to work. They're not going to listen to us. They're going to be more firm and perhaps not wanting to listen to us. But if somebody comes up to us and asks, and I wonder what these quiet people over here are thinking, then they can ask us, what are you thinking? What's this all about? And I've also group here taken on the 8 precepts, and some people are taking on the 8 precepts on more of a long-term way, and some people are taking it on more temporarily, perhaps just for the period of time of being a guest here in the monastery. And whether it's for a shorter or longer period of time, these 8 precepts are rare and hard to find in the world. And in Thai, the word for rare is actually hard to find in terms of it's ha yak. Ha means to look for, and yak means difficult. So that's the word for rare in Thai. And so these things are difficult to find in the world. It's difficult to find people who truly have integrity, people who are always honest. This is just very hard to find, and we can't expect that the world is going to become this way, but we can take responsibility for our own actions. And so the taking on of precepts is an acknowledgement of just something we can do for ourselves and take responsibility, and perhaps it will have a good effect on other people. People might be inspired by our example and want to take that on for themselves, so it can have a widening circles kind of effect. And in that sense, we can have some sort of positive benefit on the world, however small that may be. At least it's something. It's better than nothing. I'm thinking back a little bit how I approached this practice and how I approached the Dhamma and coming to the monastery in 2001 when I first came here, and just remembering kind of how I approached it and what kind of caused me to continue to have ever-growing faith in Buddhist practice and in the suttas, in the teachings. And one of the things that caused an increase in faith over time was that I kept making these mistakes, and then I kept finding them in the suttas. So I kept doing things wrong and finding it in the suttas and saying, wow, I did that, and the Buddha actually talked about it. He talked about people doing that, and he said, oh, this is how you change yourself, this is how you don't do that. And I kept seeing that over and over again, and how the Buddhas in the suttas, the suttas are so ancient, we could think of them as perhaps maybe there's a lot of corruptions in them, or as Luang Por Sumedho said, maybe it was just some guy in a bar who had some really long rant and somebody recorded it, and somehow it became the Nikayas. But even if it was that, then it actually works when you put it into practice. So the suttas are very special, and like Ajahn Jayasaro said, that's the true relics of the Buddha are the suttas, the teachings. And you get a more or less consistent voice through the 22,000 pages or so that we have of all the whole Tipitaka, or the Pali Canon, much of which has been translated into English, but some of it still hasn't been translated. So, for example, I was thinking one thing, like there's these, in the Anguttara Nikaya, there's these hidden gems of suttas. You look and think, like the Book of the Sevens, or it's one of those books you can just open it up to a random page and, I wonder what that page is going to say. And you'll find some sort of hidden gem of a teaching that might be pertinent. And so one of these teachings that I came upon where I was able to say, I was doing that when I first came here was, how does one gain no benefit from a Dhamma talk? So there's a few ways one gains no benefit from a Dhamma talk. And then I knew this was something pertinent because I had done this a lot and would continue to do it on and off over the years. And one is the mind is distracted. So if one is listening to a talk but the mind is distracted, then one gains no benefit from that talk. Or if one is sleepy or one is drowsy, then one gains no benefit from that talk. Or if one is internally refuting what the speaker is saying, then one gains no benefit from that Dhamma talk. And I could think of occasions where I did all three of those things, not in one talk, but in different times, different periods of time. And just a simple teaching like that, in a very natural teaching, that's true. Or opening up to a different random page and seeing like a phrase like, one who is generous is never without friends. So and then taking that on for consideration. Well, is that true or not? Yeah, I think it is true. Someone who's generous, they always have people who are friendly to them. They always have people who want to be around them because they're always giving people things. So, of course, if you're always giving people things or you're always helping out, you're never without friends. So a generous person is never without friends. And or you look at the precepts themselves and the benefits of the precepts, and how, if you look at, say, the 5 or the 8 precepts, none of them say you have to believe something or you have to subscribe to some sort of belief, but it's just, if you act this way, then suffering is made less, and if you act opposite of this way, then suffering is more, but you can choose. It's up to you. So, and then the Buddha is saying, ehi passiko, this is come and see for yourself, so you can try it out. And the precepts, to fulfill the precepts, it does take a measure of faith. It does take some sort of faith, because we don't really know, if we haven't followed the precepts for a long time, then we don't really know what the benefit is. But we have this belief or this confidence that they do work, because perhaps we've seen inspiring examples of people who've kept the precepts for a long time, or we've met different ajahns, maybe in Thailand. Maybe some of us have actually been to Thailand and met some of the senior monks there and been inspired and have developed faith. Then when we follow the precepts for a period of time and we start to get the results from them and we start to see the benefit of them, then we've got confirmed confidence. So then we say, yeah, it actually does work, it actually does have some good benefit. And then if we take it to the level of insight, of stream entry that's talked about in the suttas, then that's the true confirmed confidence in the practice itself. So if we take it to that point, then we really have a confirmed confidence an ignition of a fire for the practice. So we chanted the fire sermon tonight, so the Buddha's talking about putting out the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. But also when we get really interested in the practice, and we ignite a fire for virtue, ignite a fire for the practice. There's even this phrase that the word for like passion or lust in Pali is raga tanha, and it's this very negative quality that the Buddha criticizes. So this word raga, it's like a very strong word, but then he also flips it around in a way. There's also Dhamma raga, which is a positive quality that the Buddha talks about cultivating, which is like a passion for the Dhamma, which is something that fire for the Dhamma that is needed, or the fire for the spiritual. So you turn that around and actually direct it, move it in a different direction, and you can actually have a passion or a fire for spiritual things, for spiritual progress, spiritual practice. People who develop this kind of fire for spiritual practice will get interested in things like living outside or fasting, and trying to call into question just the needs of the body, and do different experimentation with the practice and see what the effect on the mind is. So that's a very important quality to be, say, nourishing in ourselves. So we talk about spiritual practice, or like being spiritual. That's a big thing nowadays. And, the Buddha also talks about there's different places where you find in the suttas about there's the spiritual, and then there's the more spiritual than the spiritual. So, of course, we want to be ultra-spiritual, so might wonder, well, what's the more spiritual than the spiritual? And that's, of course, so the spiritual is, the Buddha's talking about these different cultivations of meditation and cultivations of insight, but then the more spiritual than the spiritual is the realization of the deathless, or the realization of Nibbana, the ultimately transcendent state, which the fire sermon is actually pointing toward, where one becomes disenchanted with the six sense bases, disenchanted with the eye, disenchanted with forms, disenchanted with the ear, disenchanted with sounds, and so on, all through the six sense bases. And becoming disenchanted, their passions fade away. Their passions having faded away, the mind is liberated. So that dispassion is viraga. That's a quality that comes right before liberation in this progression that the Buddha talks about. And this is also to be thought of as a very natural progression. One translation I've seen of Buddhism, the word Buddhism, is the insight into natural truths. So I believe that's prapayuto, a religion of natural truths, or insight into natural truths. So it's that cultivation of mindfulness into things as they are in the moment, and looking into and investigating natural truths, and in so doing, helping the mind and the heart to settle down, to cool down. But that also goes together with the precepts and the different practices the Buddha recommended. So another name for Buddhism is Dhamma Vinaya. This is the Buddha's own word for his religion. So Dhamma Vinaya. Dhamma is the truth of the way things are. Vinaya is the training of body and speech, or the or the discipline. So you could think of it as truth and discipline, or you could think of it as the threefold training of body, speech, and mind, because Vinaya, for example, the Bhikkhu Vinaya, 227 precepts that the bhikkhus hold to, is the training of body and speech. So there's not a precept where you can, except in a couple of very rare and probably never would happen here circumstances, you can only break a precept by body or speech. So it's the training of body and speech. And then the Dhamma is the training of the mind. So you could also think of it as training of body, speech, and mind. And you could also think of it as virtue of body, speech, and mind, or cultivation of the wholesome by body, speech, and mind. And the Vinaya, the discipline, the training of body and speech, that can have a positive effect on the mind. And in a way, there's a time lag where we have to actually restrain ourselves and go against what we might want to do or what we might like to do. And that's why the practice ends up being difficult for most people. Again, unless you're a very rare type of person, then the practice ends up being difficult, but because it entails that we go against what we might like, and we run up against some things that we might dislike. So there is that difficulty in the practice, because the mind is in one place, and then we're training the body and speech in another place. But then eventually, the idea or the ethos behind the Vinaya, behind the practice, is that the mind will eventually surrender to those precepts and fall into line with that virtuous behavior, and then the mind becoming virtuous. We can also go the other way and train the mind, and the body and speech becomes more virtuous. So these two things, they reinforce each other. But if we can only suffer for so long in our training of body and speech before either we're going to give up that training or the mind is going to surrender and become more virtuous and give up the unruliness, give up its unruliness, which ends up being a cause for suffering. All this is not to say that we need to be overly hard on ourselves or overly tense in the practice. There is this balance. So a lot of what we come back to, say we sit down to meditate, the whole idea is, the first step really is to relax. So when we come to the practice, say we're maybe new to the precepts, new to the practice, we hope to at least be able to relax a little bit into the practice. So the Buddha talks about Anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing practice. Ana is like in and out. Pana is the Pali word. Most of us are probably more familiar with the Sanskrit word prana. So it's like the life force, which in this case we're referring to the breath. So anapana is like the in and out life force. Sati is recollection, which we translate as mindfulness. Literally has a connotation of recollection. So mindfulness of breathing, recollection of breathing. This is one of the clearest meditation instructions that the Buddha gives in the suttas. So Anapanasati, and then there's these 16 stages of Anapanasati, and for myself, I tend to want to focus on the first 4 because it deals with the body. And first step of Anapanasati, very, very simple, very basic meditation instruction. This is breathing in long, one knows I breathe in long. Breathing out long, one knows I breathe out long. Breathing in short, one knows I breathe in short. Breathing out short, one knows I breathe out short. Those are the first two stages, just the long breathing and the short breathing. So considering the state of the breath, taking stock of the breath, how is it? Not trying to control it in any way, but what kind of state is it in as we sit down to meditate? Third stage is breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So this can be seen in a couple different ways. Some writers and teachers explain it as the whole body means the whole body of the breath, which then further means experiencing the breath as it comes in the nose and down through into the diaphragm and back up, and noticing the breath sensation there. That's one way of doing it. Totally valid. The way I've tended to use is taking stock of the whole body, the breath energy in the whole body, and coming back to pana or prana, that definition, the life force, the way the breath actually comes in, the oxygen coming in and through the lungs, and then it goes into the blood with each breath, and then the carbon dioxide coming back out. So the breath energy actually does permeate the whole body. And we're experiencing the whole body. I breathe in. Experiencing the whole body. I breathe out. The whole body from the head to the toes. In doing that, we can do different practices like Ajahn Ñāṇiko like to recommend body sweeping. And so actually feeling the different parts of the body, the eyes, the face, the shoulders, chest, noticing where there might be tension. The hands, noticing if the hands are tensing up or if the hands are relaxed. Feet, legs, just noticing if there's any tension or any pain in the body anywhere, or what parts feel comfortable, what parts might feel painful. And then that naturally leads into the fourth step, which is breathing in, calming the whole body, and breathing out, calming the whole body. So the way I have tended to work with this is breathing in, calming the whole body, breathing out, calming the whole body, is having done that third step, having experienced the whole body, and having taken stock of where there might be tension in the body. Then we move on to that fourth step and breathing in and out, calming the whole body. So and I like to think of it as consciously calming the whole body. So if the eyes or the face have tension in them, then we're consciously calming that. If the chest has tension, we're consciously calming that. If the shoulders, the hands, and so on have tension, then we're consciously calming that. And we're using the breath to consciously calm that. So in this stage, actually, we might have to take a deep breath. So say the breath is short or tight, the chest is tight, we might actually want to breathe into that and consciously calm it. Sometimes if there's anxiety, then it can be felt in the heart center, so we might have to take a deep breath. I found for myself with anxiety, taking a deep breath can be very helpful with that. Or there's some sort of painful mental proliferation. The mind is very distracted and just can't stop thinking about some inane thing, some old song, or just some memory that is kind of pointless, and the mind's just kind of glommed onto it. So Ajahn Chah had a method for that. He said, breathe in as deep as you can, and then hold your breath as long as you can. And then when you hold your breath as long as you can, then breathe out as long as you can, and then hold your breath. Having breathed out all of your air, hold your breath again as long as you can. And do that 3 times. And usually that inane or meaningless, wild mental proliferation will calm down a little bit, usually if you do something like that. So you can use the breath techniques just to bring yourself back to mindfulness. We're not asking that people stop thinking completely, and the Buddha's not asking us to do this. When somebody asked Longpo Cha, what do I do? I can't meditate, I can't stop thinking. And Longpo Cha is like, well, there's only one type of person who doesn't think. And like, what? Maybe an arhat, or maybe an enlightened being? And Ajahn Chah said, no, a dead person. Just a dead person doesn't think. And so we can that can cut through any preconceived notions we have about maybe like, an arhat may be in a state of no thought or complete mental blankness. That's certainly not what we're aiming for. So what we're looking for is this very relaxed, natural, embodied awareness. We can use that new term that a lot of teachers these days like to use, but I like it as well. Embodied awareness, and that sense of the awareness is in the body. We're directing the awareness to the body and using that to relax and investigate the body. One of the translations we talk about these different types of solitude as well. When we come to the monastery and we practice in the monastery, we live in solitary huts up on the hillside. And there's these three types of solitude. There's kaya viveka, chitta viveka, and upadi viveka. Kaya viveka is bodily seclusion, chitta viveka is seclusion of the mind, and then upadi viveka is the ultimate seclusion, or just seclusion from the defilements, or liberation. And normally we think of kaya viveka, bodily seclusion, as being away from other people. So being up, going up after the meal, being in our hut, being by ourselves, engaging in either maybe taking a short rest, sitting meditation, walking meditation, but that sense of being on your own. That's one way of thinking of it. And Longpo Liam talks about kaya viveka in a different way, where he says kaya viveka is actually secluded in the body, or that embodied awareness, trying to cultivate that at all times, where we actually are in ourselves. We're not dispersed. We're not going out from our body, so that even if we're around other people, we can have kaya viveka. Chitta viveka is one that Ajahn Sumedho spoke in praise of a lot, and that's why he wanted to name the first monastery of our tradition in Europe, Chithurst Buddhist Monastery. He called it Chitta Viveka because Ajahn Chah sent him there to England, and he could see that even though his tendency or his personality was to be very hermit-like and want to be on his own, he saw that he wasn't going to be able to get away from being around people, and he really wanted that be in my kuti, away, do the hermit practice, be on my own, but being in community, that's not going to be possible. He's going to have to be teaching, be around people a lot. So he thought, well, he's going to have chitta viveka, where the mind isn't actually going out, and he could actually have seclusion of mind. He realized he could do it after a period of time, that he could actually have chitta viveka, or seclusion of mind, within the community, within the being around other people, where his mind he could actually keep it in. This is similar to the way Longpo Liam's talking about kaya viveka, but Ajahn Sumedho would talk about chitta viveka more, where the chitta, or the heart, is actually staying in and not going out, and also not allowing it to be as affected by external circumstances, so that he could still, in a sense, have a posture or a mood or a feeling of meditation, even while he was within the midst of a big community. Then there's the upadi viveka, seclusion from the defilements. This is what we talk about when we talk about the final point of the practice. There's also the different shelters or the different homes the Buddha talks about. So he talks about one night's shelter, one life's shelter, and then the eternal or the deathless shelter. And that's another interesting teaching we'll find if we end up reading through the suttas. The one night's shelter is our dwelling place. So we relate to our dwelling place as a dwelling for a day and a night. We never know where we'll be the next day or the next night. So that's one night's shelter. One life's shelter is this body. So this body is our shelter for this life. So that's for our whole life. We have the karma of whatever body we've acquired in this life. So we're all individual bodies in here, and we have our different ailments and pains here and there, and whatever else is going on with our body and our age and any qualities our body may have. So that's the one life's shelter, and then the deathless shelter or the eternal shelter, that's the three refuges. So that's the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. That's the true shelter, or as Ajahn Chah would refer to it, as our real home. That's our real home. Buddha Dhamma Sangha. If we think of those as internal qualities, Buddha being the one who knows, or purified awareness, Dhamma being the truth of the way things are, Sangha being the virtue. In an internal sense, we say virtue of body, speech, and mind, and Sangha is an example of that type of virtue. So these are just a few things to think about on this Half Moon Wanpra, and we won't have our mandatory all-night vigil, but people are welcome to stay up and practice for a while if they want. And these are just a few different recollections or reflections on the precepts and what we're doing here in the monastery, and some interesting little tidbits from the suttas, and reason why we might request a Dhamma talk and not just start speaking Dhamma just to anybody on the street, and different interesting suttas like how to listen to a Dhamma talk, or the different types of seclusion, the different types of shelters. So I'll leave that as a reflection this evening.